So opening remarks. A new intriguing government has been formed, and the concept that created it defines new guidelines of the political arena. This is not a government of the left or the right, but a government of moderates, opposite extremism, a government of national dialogue, opposite or versus disputes, and also a younger government, not a non-corrupt government, with a lot of goodwill from all parts involved. And Israel's foreign policy is changing with it. We believe it's time to show the world different face of Israel, a thriving liberal democracy, a strong country, a country that believes in that maintaining and preserving human rights is part of its power. It's not weakening us. Israel has a good story to tell. It's a strong, optimistic story with the values that we believe are right, and we believe in the ability of this government and this foreign ministry to bring this story to the world. This new government of ours also have limits. It is concentrated mostly on domestic issues, and you cannot really expect in this ensemble for policy breakthroughs. But we have to admit, all of us, that the reality on the other side, the Palestinian side mostly, dictates the same standstill. I am a devoted believer in the two-state solution. I think this is the right solution, but we'll have to admit to the fact this is not feasible in the current situation. On the practical level, on the other hand, our declared goal is to do whatever is possible to improve the life of Palestinians in terms of the economy, security, also self-governance, and also public health and fighting the pandemic. As published, the Minister of Defense has just met this week with President Abbas, and Israel has approved a series of measures to improve the economic situation of the Palestinians, including a loan of half a billion shekels. We have working relations with the PA, and we are not interested in weakening them. As for Gaza, let me remind you, the only policy interest we have in Gaza is, apart from, of course, bringing back the two living Israeli citizens that are kept there, and that are there in captivity, and the bodies of two Israeli soldiers. Our only goal is maintaining peace. We are not interested in going back to Gaza. We are not interested in choking Gaza in sieges. We just want to make sure nobody's firing rockets and missiles on us. And if Hamas will guarantee peace and quiet, they can guarantee also the economy and functioning economy and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. Our two largest security and policy challenges were and still are Iran and Hezbollah. The prime ministers came back from Washington after a very successful visit, came back on Sunday. We have agreed not to agree with the Americans about the nuclear agreement, about the JCPOA, but right now it seems like the agreement is not going anywhere, and the talks are not going anywhere. Nobody's coming to Vienna. So the world needs a plan B. And Iran needs to know there is a credible threat on it. If they will keep on advancing their nuclear programs as they do now. Iran also have a new government, and in some way or somewhat, it is easier for us to explain the essence of this regime when you look at this government. It is now on the screens to your side. So look at them. This looks like the most wanted list of international terror. I mean, the majority of ministers in this government is people who are either sanctioned or were on the most of the list of Interpol. And it is the person who is heading this government is Said Ibrahim Raisi, the butcher of Tehran, who is personally was in charge and been held responsible for the death of tens of thousands of dissidents. Up north, Lebanon has transformed from a country with a terror organization to a terror organization with a country. Hezbollah is the largest terror organization in the world. This is one of the reasons the collapse, or almost the total collapse, of Lebanon worries us a lot. We are more than willing to reach out and grant any humanitarian aid necessary, and we will be more than happy to cooperate with the international community doing so. For those of you who are interested with our conflict with Poland, I have no conflict with the Polish people. I have a conflict with the government that time and again tries to deny what happened in Poland during the Holocaust. Israel will not compromise on the memory of the victims, and the Polish government needs to abolish the bill from 2018 and the new bill as well, and to understand that the Jews will never again be afraid to fight for their own honor. Another issue that has to do with it is the fact that on the sidelines of the next General Assembly this month in New York, there's going to be an anti-Semite event headlined 20 years to the Durban Conference. This is not a conference against racism. This is a conference of racists. It was like this in Durban 1, it was like this in Durban 2, it was like this in Durban 3, and it's going to be like this in Durban 4. It is a conference that empowers racism, not fighting racism. And this is a conference that's doing a terrible use and abuse of the tragic history of African Americans and Africans in general in order to preach hatred against Jews and Israelis. So we all have to unite against racism, but the Durban Conference was always a tool to divide us, and upon our request, many countries has already announced they're not going to attend this conference of hatred, but we expect any country that cares about human rights and civil rights not to attend the conference. But I want to finish my opening remarks with a happier note. So since this government was formed, we opened offices in the Emirates, in Morocco. I'm going to open a new office in Bahrain. The new ambassador has just arrived yesterday. We strengthened our relations with the American administration and the European Union, and we are in the midst of a momentum bringing Israel back to the community that it needs to be and hopes to be, which is a community of countries that are optimistic, technological, proud, liberal democracies. These are my opening remarks, and now we're opening the floor for any questions. Your
yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Now remember to state your name and who you're working for. I'll use the chair's privilege and ask the first one. Kabul. We know that withdrawal operations are hard, they're difficult. No one in Israel needs a lesson on that. Nevertheless, when you see America, Israel's key ally, in such visible retreat, in such a manner, you must be very concerned.
Well, I think the entire globe was concerned, and first and foremost, the Americans themselves. It didn't happen the way it was supposed to happen, and then again, it was probably the right decision, maybe that wasn't performed in the right manner, and yet I suggest everyone listen to President Biden's last speech about the necessity of the move itself. And I'm not going to remark on the way our greatest ally is acting on the arena. I'm just going to tell you that there is a reason, and part of the fact that this alliance of ours with the Americans is ever so strong is because Israel has always stood for the principle that we are going to protect ourselves by ourselves, that you cannot run your security on proxy, you cannot ask others to do your job for you in terms of maintaining life and peace, and this principles has been proved again and again and again in the history of the world and the history of the Middle East in particular. So I don't think we already understand completely all the consequences of this move, of this retreat. I mean, in terms of what is the effect on Pakistan, on the long border Iran now has with a radical Sunni state and run by a radical Sunni organization. It's going to have a huge impact on the struggle between Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. So I think we should wait a little before we jump to conclusions about what exactly is going to be the aftermath of this.
But other things being equal, you need America heavily invested in the region, and the trend line is going the other way, isn't it?
I'm not sure about this. I think the United States is trying, and this is what you do when you are the superpower, to find new ways to influence what is going on. I don't think the United States is retreating from the Middle East. This was part of the discussions the Prime Minister just had in Washington. This is part of the discussions I'm having with my counterparts, especially Secretary Blinken. I don't think the United States is retreating altogether. I think the way to operate is being updated all around the world, and the Americans and this administration are very keen in being on the top of the current game, not the game that was played before.
Okay, I'll take two questions from here. Dan.
Is there a reason you took my bottle of water? Are we saving money on this in any way? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. A question: what's Israel's position on the U.S. intention to reopen the consulate in Jerusalem? Where do things stand? And specifically, is Israel having misgivings about the idea of reopening at the original location on the Ron Street, given that it's West Jerusalem? Has Israel proposed alternative sites east of the Green Line?
We think it's a bad idea, and we've told America we think it's a bad idea, because for two reasons. One is, I mean, the consulate was there for 130 years. I know the history, but once it was closed, reopening it will send the wrong message. We feel it will send the wrong message, not only to the region, not only to the Palestinians, but also to other countries. And we don't want this to happen. And besides, we have an interesting yet delicate structure of our government, and we think this might destabilize this government, and I don't think the American administration wants this to happen. So both for political reasons, and politics and policy is always mixed, and on ideological and for ideological reasons, Jerusalem is the sovereign capital of Israel and Israel alone. And therefore, we don't think it's a good idea. We know that the administration has a different way of looking at this, but since this is happening in Israel, we are sure that they are listening to us very carefully when we explain to them our point of view on this.
Yep.
Qasim from Shark TV. First Iranian oil ship in its way to Beirut, and the second one maybe already left the Iranian to Lebanon. How would Israel deal with this specific issue. And
I didn't hear the beginning of your question. The first what?
the first Iranian oil ship moved from Iran to Beirut, and it's almost there. And the second one left also from Iran to Lebanon. How would Israel deal with this specific issue? And about the meeting between Chairman Arafat, Chairman Abbasian, and Gantz, is it a private policy of Gantz, what happens there and what we see there, or it's coordinated Israeli policy, or what happened afterwards?
The good thing about asking two questions, I get to pick the one I like. No, but yeah, well, the second one is the easy one. Of course, it was coordinated both with the Prime Minister, with me, with the Foreign Ministry, we have, as I was saying in my opening remarks, we have an ongoing security relations and coordination with the Palestinian Authority, and maybe this kind of meetings will well do. So yes, it was coordinated. But I'm not going to respond about the oil ships coming from Iran to Lebanon, because this is the kind of security issue that we are discussing with the countries involved. As I was saying, we not only that we have no interest in Lebanon collapsing and their ability to maintain the economy is of course the most important thing. We have a deep interest in Lebanon existing and having a functioning government and a visible operation. So we'd have to take everything into account, including some security issues. So I'm not going to respond more than that.
Let me just take a question from Zoom, which just sort of picks up a little bit on the meeting between Abbas and Gantz. This is from Hannah Feugl from Danish Public Radio. You've sort of addressed the first bit, so I'm going to move on to the second bit of her question. Is it realistic to imagine that you can keep stressing, in terms of the relations between Israel and the PA, that there are no negotiations at the moment? Is it realistic to sort of park indefinitely that diplomatic track and certainly use rhetoric that suggests that it is very much kicked into the long grass? Or do you not have to at some point pick that up? And might that point be when you become Prime Minister?
Well, it is realistic because this is the way things are, and not only on this side of the border. You have on the PA an administration, if you can call it this, that has been in election since I think 2005 or six, and all depend on the one hand of a person who's I think 84 years old, and nobody knows what comes next. We can have our hopes. We can believe the unbelievable, and I think it was the late Shimon Peres who said once that if you don't believe in fantasies, fantasies will never come true. So what I think we need to do is to keep an eye on what is going on in the PA, and to make sure we're not doing anything which will be destructive to the future prospect of going back into negotiation and to the negotiation table and try to find a positive solution, which is, as I was saying, I believe it's the two-state solution. This is, and probably 2 years from now, if I'll have my chance, we'll start discussing this. I don't know with whom, by the way. But since I'm not going to do anything behind the backs of my partners in this coalition, it will be transparent and very, very careful. As I was saying, right now the problem is it's not feasible on both sides of in both administrations in many ways. So we'll have to wait and see.
I'm going to pick Joe. Just one thing for the technical crew here. I'm told from the people online that they can't hear the questions. So I don't know if... we'll do run around the microphone. So Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted, Joe Fetterman from AP, good to see you. I just wanted to pick up on what you were discussing on the Palestinian issue. Could you outline a little bit more about what Israel is willing to do? Because right now what we've seen, essentially Israel's rolling back the clock to 3 months ago, to 6 months ago, a year ago. But this, what we've seen over the past couple of days, this is nothing we haven't seen in the past. Is the new government willing to take grander gestures? Because we've been hearing about economic peace, lifting checkpoints, and so forth. We've been hearing that for years, and nothing ever really changes. Is there anything bigger and broader that this government has in mind, than what we've seen in the past?
I'm not sure whether this was a question or a challenge, and yet, as I was saying, after an endless instability of this country and the political system, our political system, we have managed miraculously to form this government that is made out of very different bodies. And we have said from day one, everything that has to do with the day-to-day life of Palestinians will do. But this is a government that is going to be concentrated on domestic issues, on the economy, on the pandemic, on the healing of the Israeli society from years of division and hatred. And hate speech became our political lingo. And there's a healing process that is happening right now, and this is what we're going to do in the coming year or 2 or 3. And I'm saying this with deep sorrow. I feel, this is out of necessity. If I could have it my way, yes, we would move forward and come back to the negotiation table. I don't know. Listen, I don't know if it will succeed. We have failed so many times, but I think this is needed. But right now, I don't want to make promises I cannot keep. I feel this government needs to concentrate on the day-to-day life of Israelis, the day-to-day life of Palestinians, maintaining the peace, doing as much humanitarian work as possible with and for the Palestinians, doing as much as economical work as possible with the Palestinians, and wait for the right moment. We have proved, even in this short period that this government exists, that we can forward so many things in the Middle East. I opened the office in the EU. It was an historic moment. I opened the office, soon to become embassy, in Morocco. This country was dreaming about this. I'm opening the office, soon to be embassy, in Bahrain. We're talking to other countries. You will ask me in a second which countries. I will not answer. And this history is being made, but history is being made in baby steps. And this is the way it's going to be, unfortunately, maybe.
No good.
Thank you, Mr. Foreign Minister. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, one foreign affairs and one domestic.
Mm-hmm. Can I have a pen from somebody? Yes. Go ahead.
Foreign affairs, I would like to ask you to what an extent the new government is changing its policies towards China in the context of this sort of reset of relations between Israel and the United States. What demands the United States has made, and what is Israel offering in order to reset that? Domestically, you have talked a few times about the miracle of this new government, but you haven't spoken, to my knowledge, about the fact that you made a sacrifice unprecedented in Israeli history, in the political history of this country, in order to form this government. And I'm curious how the decision was made and how you feel about this place that you're in.
Now I know which question I liked better. So here about China, there is no concrete demand coming from the Americans about our relations with China. We understand, as any other country on earth understands, that it's not a conflict, but the kind of tension there is between the United States and especially the new administration is going to dictate a lot of international versus China is going to dictate a lot of the international maneuvering in the coming future. But there's nobody has asked us to change anything. We have very good bilateral relations with China. We're doing a lot of business with them. They have investors in the Israeli economy. Israeli companies are working in China. It's an interesting market for us, and we are an interesting market for them because of the technological abilities of Israel. On the other hand, we have never, I mean, it is not as great in the arena of international organizations. We are having an ongoing discussion with our Chinese friends about this, hoping to improve. But we have never tended to hide the fact that our greatest ally is one and one only, and this is the United States. And we tend to march together, and we march together because we share the same values. And these values, I mean, Henry Kissinger wrote a lot about the fact, you know, that policies are being made with the balance between realism and idealism, and so you're playing a long-term game on this one. Again, it is important to us to maintain the relations with China, but we're going to listen to the Americans when they talk about it. On the domestic arena, it's the question. I don't feel I sacrificed anything. I feel I did the right thing. And when you're doing the right thing, I have children in this country. And I felt that if we're not going to change not only the government, but also the atmosphere, and we will not stop the march that was going on towards Israel becoming what some people call illiberal democracy, which is a problem because illiberal democracy is not a democracy. This country is going to sink into a place we don't want to see it sinking to. So, for me, forming a government, becoming the foreign minister of this government is the greatest honor of my life, not a sacrifice. And so I feel pretty good about this. And besides, and this has nothing to do with what you usually talk about in politics, but I like the people I'm with. It's just an added value to the whole thing. And I think Naftali Bennett is a very good prime minister. He's doing the right things in the right manner. And I like working with him and with this entire government. So I like what I do. And more than that, I like the course this country is taking because of the fact we have formed this government.
I should take one from over. Daniel.